This Tuesday was a super fun day here at the Ken studio in Bangalore. Right? Like, let's talk about the cost of living, how it's gone up, like how we have to, rents are going up, and like salaries are not going up, So let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what is your experience?
Yeah, if anyone from the Ken is hearing this, please give me a good appraisal. My rent has gone up.
Now, if you're a regular listener of this podcast, you will remember that we've spoken quite a few times about property prices going through the roof in India's metro cities, especially in the national capital. This, along with the ever increasing rents and general cost of living, has made planning for the future quite challenging for those in their 20s and 30s. And this is something that we're seeing play out across the world, the housing crisis especially. But the India story is slightly different. I think, and I'm sure you'll agree, that there is a certain kind of romanticism attached to the idea of owning a home here. Think about your parents' generation and what a place that they could call their own meant to them. And that idea has kind of passed on to us. I think most of us have grown up thinking about having our own homes as the ultimate win in life. I'm reminded of all those movies from the 70s and 80s where home ownership was such a common theme. If you're a Bollywood fan, I'm sure you'll remember this iconic, albeit melodramatic dialogue between Shashi Kapoor and Amitabh Bachchan in the movie Diwar.
आज मेरे पास बिल्डिंगें हैं, प्रॉपर्टी है, बैंक बैलेंस है, बंगला है, गाड़ी है, क्या है तुम्हारे पास? मेरे पास माँ है.
To say things have changed a lot ever since would be an understatement. Property prices across Indian cities shot up nearly 30% in the last 2 years. India's nominal GDP has grown by 80% and nominal income by nearly 130% in the period since, but still it hasn't been enough to keep up with the real estate prices. So, has the idea of home ownership changed among the younger generations, like in many Western countries where more and more people are choosing to rent rather than buy? So many of them are moving in with their siblings, their parents, or even their friends. Or are we still attached to the idea of owning a home? To find out, I thought, why not invite some of my young colleagues from the Ken, all in their 20s, to the studio after lunch for a casual, open-ended chat about this. And also to understand exactly what is going on with these record-breaking property prices and what young, aspiring homeowners are faced with in India right now, I was joined by my colleague, the brilliant Ronak Kumar Gunjan, who has been covering this subject for a while now. Welcome to Daybreak, a business podcast from the Ken. I'm your host, Nigda Sharma, and I don't chase the news cycle. Instead, every day of the week, my colleague Rahil Philippos and I will come to you with one business story that is worth understanding and worth your time. Today is Friday, the 24th of January.
Definitely no buying house plan
No?
forever in my life. No.
Never in your life.
Pretty much no. So when you look at any kind of real estate prices that are there at the moment, I mean any kind of basic EMI for a home. Like I saw my father paying off his dues in whatever apartment that he had. It was like 30-year term loans where more than half of your salary goes in just paying the EMI. Not sustainable with the kind of life and expenses that I have. Okay, I have to pay rent and that is pricey for me, but that is still something that I can find and downsize upon when rent goes high or something. It's an effort. I won't say no, it's not. But still a much lesser cost to pay than an EMI. And also, like with the kind of job and life I have, it won't be as viable for me to buy one place in one city where I am very place agnostic and I would like to go around wherever opportunities are. Can't do that if I buy a home and half my paycheck is going for that EMI. Better to pay for the rent. One, that plus like even in terms of affordability, the kind of home that I'll end up buying on my paycheck right now, it would be so bad compared to the amount of EMI I would pay. It'll be like one pansy, one BHK or one RK that I'll have to end up buying, but I'll still be paying half my paycheck in terms of EMI for it. The price to utility ratio doesn't exist there.
I mean,
but like I'm also like very romantically attached to the idea of owning a home.
Owning a
like
home.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
especially like somewhere back home, which is not like going to be Bangalore prices definitely. Yeah.
so I was saying I also do agree with the fact that it might not make much sense to buy a house, especially in a metropolitan now. But I have to acknowledge that first of all, I am privileged to come from a family where we own the house that we live in, and those benefits I think definitely in the long run, maybe not in our youth, but eventually it's going to be maybe a state where if you're a tenant at the end of the day, if you're a person who's leasing out a space, things might change at any time. The landlord, the whoever owns the property, anything can happen. There's a lot of unforeseen events that can occur, and if you do not have something that you can call your own in terms of property or something, you run the risk of being a nomad who might be asked to vacate at any point, legal terms and all aside. So I mean, I personally look at real estate right now more as an investment opportunity than as a home owning opportunity. But I do definitely see the merits of having a house that you can call your own.
I think that comes a lot with circumstances as well. Like, because similar to Abhirami, even my parents, I've grown up abroad. So suddenly if any circumstance changes there and like we have to move back, we need a place that we can call our own. So in those kind of situations, having a house of your own is something that is kind of unavoidable, because if you have to move with everything that you already have, you cannot look for something after you reach here and then move into it, right? So it only makes sense to already have something where you can move, which is the entire thought process behind my parents also buying a house in India. So I think it's totally circumstance based, but I definitely agree with the whole EMI thing as well.
First of all, like if you have to buy a house, invest in a house, it's a 30s decision. Like it's something where you can afford to pay it when you're in 30s, eventually, if you can. But it definitely depends on all of these things, because the rent prices won't go down anytime soon. It will never go down. In fact, the prices of apartments keep rising with what is the increment of rent every year?
10%, I guess.
11%, and
That's just an agreement. It will go spike up whatever between 20 to 50% depending on the
It can be anything. Considering I have a tenant, I have given a small house or 1 BHK for a tenant. I know it's left to the landowner. So having a roof over your head, which is yours, and making a smart investment is always beneficial in the 20 years run, which people, I don't think in this generation are realizing yet.
okay.
Real estate is still the best investment you can make.
So
That's
I have a slightly contrarian view, and I believe in the decades to come we might actually see an emigration from cities, at least at least for certain strata or classes of society. There are a lot of conversations already happening, and we have covered so many stories about how there's a housing crisis over here, how there's the crisis of traffic, of prices, of just the standard of living. People in Delhi NCR are seeing the first-hand effects of pollution. My friends are getting diagnosed with bronchitis and a lot of these other problems. So I think future generations, especially when we are parents ourselves, and I think when our kids are going to grow up too, I think we might see a reversal of the trend where at least the more affluent, which is not necessarily a good thing for the overall nation, but we might see people coming to the city for brief periods for work or maybe for investments, but choosing to reside in more rural or more remote areas. I have a feeling that might happen, but I think we're still decades away
That's
from
similar to how people move to Mysore as well.
Yeah.
They spend most of their working life in Bangalore and move to like Mysore and stuff like that.
And like I think the logical extension of this is that more there should be like more infrastructure in these areas as well. Like obviously if you're going to move, you're going to have a family, you need schools, you need hospitals, you need that kind of infrastructure on par with whatever is happening in like cities and big cities. So I think that is also maybe like a side effect of like what will happen if what you are saying like does happen.
I think the more short-term trigger for that would be the amount of flexibility your jobs will afford.
Correct.
Because we move places only for jobs, right? I can very well move to Udupi and like that's where my parents are, and it's like we're so serene every day to live there by the beach and everything. But can't quite do it because my job's here, and if I can't move around from Udupi everywhere that way. So it'll be dependent on like where the job scenario as such is. But if I can offer like a contrarian point of view, like in terms of affordability of these buying of homes of sorts, it as a person who doesn't stand to inherit much, so I am pretty much paycheck to paycheck person, and I have to build up my savings and everything. There is nothing that I can bank on that is huge amount of money or property that is coming in my name. That way I see real estate to be a very expensive investment in my end. I would rather put money in stocks and SIPs and get more creative on how I can increase my returns over there. I am a risk averse investor, so I'll put money into more safer, higher margin kind of stuff than something like a real estate, which is super long term. It's a 30-year investment if I make one. If I put it now, 30 years later, that's the only thing I'll have there. So in that way, I would rather not put money into flats or anything.
Hari? Anything? Okay, Rahil has something. No?
I
No,
just
what are your
have.
thoughts?
Nah,
Yeah,
nah,
your
nah.
general
Mic in
thoughts.
front of your face, you just-
I think it depends from person to person, because even I had an extended period of time when I was staying home during the pandemic, and I was like earning a little bit of money. Ideally, best case scenario, I should have seen that as an opportunity to save tons of money. I saw that as an opportunity to blow up tons of money because everything else was paid for by my parents. So I think it really does matter from person. I mean, it varies from person to person and also varies from situation to situation.
One point. So when we're talking about like buying and everything, we are viewing it very like individually because like we are of that demographic and all. But like let's say 5 years down the line when people want to settle and like all of that, so then then it's not just your income, it's like probably double income. And so you make like your perspective on this may evolve, right? Like, okay, you know what, like maybe not for myself necessarily just, but if there's someone else also, so perhaps like we may want a roof, like so so I mean, so perhaps like we all many of us ended up saying like not buying, and but perhaps you have also been viewing it like a little more individualistically as of now.
Correct.
It's a 30s decision, basically, when you are able to make the decision eventually.
Perhaps,
Depends on when you can think about it, basically.
perhaps,
I think flip side to this is also that, like Rahul said Rahul said family. I say like for this thing, it's more parents because I know my parents are going to retire at some point.
So, you see how more or less the attachment to the idea of owning a home is still going pretty strong among younger people. But to fully understand exactly what is happening to the property market in India's big cities and what this generation is faced with, I went to my colleague Ronak. Stay tuned. Hi Ronak, thank you so much for joining us. So to begin with, I want to ask you, and it might come across as a very daft, kind of a question, but like, why are things so hugely different when it comes to this generation, compared to our parents? I mean, at our age, most of them had already, bought their homes. They were financially stable. They kind of had their life together, right? Like at least the basic boxes were ticked. And I know that the cost of living has gone up drastically, but also, I mean, so has disposable income, right? And I remember in your story, you had mentioned, you gave this example of a person who earns about 2 lakhs a month, 2 lakh rupees a month, and, which is way, way more than what his father earned back in the day. And you even considered the 6% average inflation. And still, his father managed to feed a family of 6 for over 30 years. He educated all these children. He bought 2 plots of land. He got his daughter married. Like, what has happened?
Sure. Firstly, thanks, Snigdha. It's an absolute pleasure. You're right.
we are very different generation when it comes to owning a house. But the thing is that both generations somehow consider owning a house to be a societal ambition that they want to achieve, right? But the problem is that interest rates have been going up and living costs have been going up, inflation has been going up, and incomes aren't really going up in the same measure. And this has been happening across major countries like the UK, the US, in India as well. I was reading somewhere that almost 45% people aged between 19 to 29 are living with their parents. And that has been the highest since the 1940s, according
This
to the
is
survey.
this is from India, this data?
No, this is for the US.
Okay, okay.
And similar numbers have been taken in the UK as well.
Yeah.
So we're seeing this as a global trend where people want to buy houses, but they're not able to because living costs are higher than the amount of money that they're able to make.
Right. Yeah, it's just been so insane. I remember that Magic Bricks report, I think that you also mentioned in your story, that average housing prices in Delhi and Bombay have gone up by, Mumbai, sorry, have gone up by over 10 times the average annual household incomes. And yet, still we are seeing just last month, I think this news came out where, this penthouse was sold in Gurgaon for nearly 200 crore rupees. Rents have gone up like never before. But okay, let's go back to the many people that you spoke to who have just put their dreams on hold for buying or renting a home, and they have decided to move in with their parents or families. Like, I want to know, what did they tell you?
Hmm. So both for the newsletter and the stories, we spoke to people who've moved back home from, say, tier one cities or metro cities and moved to tier two cities or their hometowns. Most of the people who I spoke to said that it was a financially wise decision because also we saw it in the story as well during our reporting that for almost every city in India, the property prices slash real estate prices have moved up faster than the growth in real incomes for people.
Yeah.
Right. So incomes have lagged, which is why it is difficult for them to buy a house. It is also difficult for them to rent a house because rental incomes have also, really moved up in the last post pandemic. They've really gone sky high. So it's increasingly difficult for people to live in cities or to sort of manage by themselves through their own salaries. So they're moving in with their parents or their siblings. People are going back to their hometowns. A couple of reasons why it's working. One, because even if the income is not really high for the child, the number of years that he'll be working may be in the range of 25 to 30 years. While the income of their parents was pretty high. So the banks are slightly more comfortable in giving out loans to them. So they're able to buy properties, and even if they're not buying, they're just moving inside the homes of the parents.
Right.
So they're saving on rent, etc. as well.
Right. So, Ronak, you decided to move in with your parents, and I know that it was not just for the money part, but also to be closer to them and spend more time with them. No, wait. Oh, sorry. They moved to Delhi from Calcutta to your place of work, right? So you wrote about that experience, right? And what happened when you applied for a home loan? I would really appreciate it if you could tell our listeners that story of your
Yeah,
experience.
yeah. So the property cost was much higher than say even 7x or 8x of my annual income. Personal finance experts say that the cost of property should not be more than 5x of the borrower's annual income. But it was way beyond that. And while banks do give out loans which are slightly riskier in terms of annual income being far less than the property cost, but in this case, the bank said that it'll be slightly risky to give out this loan because we don't know if you'll be able to furnish it or not.
Right.
But when they had a co-applicant, somebody who obviously earned far more, and combined with the fact that I would be working for another, say, 30-35 years, then they became slightly more comfortable that even if he is not earning enough, there's another co-applicant who will be able to furnish the loan in case he won't be able to. So that became a comforting factor for the bank, and they were able to give out the loan.
Got it. Okay. You also met so many people who are looking for their forever home, and they have managed to save, money through savings or, taking loans. And it's a lot of money. I mean, you mentioned in your stories, it's like minimum 2 crores for a decent flat apartment, right? What is the process of house hunting like for these people right now?
Yeah, so their search begins with a lot of hope, because even they think that the 2 crore corpus should be enough to get them a decent house. But very soon that changes into surprise, because the kind of properties that are shown to them within their budget, they sort of don't meet the bar in terms of quality, in terms of ambience maybe, or in terms of just the fact that they wanted a more posh looking society, etc. But it's sad that people from Gurgaon, Central Delhi, parts of Noida, Greater Noida are not able to buy houses within that budget. Also, if you speak to real estate agents, or even if you speak to on ground staff of the bank, etc., they would tell you that to be able to buy even a decent flat, 3 BHK flat in Delhi, NCR, Gurgaon, you will have to shell out anywhere between 2 to 2.5 crores if you want a decent flat. Otherwise, there are builders who are building low quality flats, etc. You could get your hands on it, but there's no point living in those houses. So the hunt for these people begin with a lot of hope. I mean, that's understandable, right? They're looking for homes, but with the kind of inventory that is shown to them within that budget, they usually come back with a lot of despair. And then sort of they look for houses where there's a resale available, or somebody who's selling it off in a hurry, etc. So, and these are all one-off cases. It's not possible for everybody to find such homes. So most of the people who are looking for homes are sort of putting off their plans, because almost every property they reach is out of budget for them.
Right. Can you also explain to us why exactly this is happening? Like, let's take the example of Delhi NCR itself. You said in your story about how, it has something to do with these crazy prices, have something to do with, outside builders coming in and local builders not being able to catch up with them and spend that kind of money, right? Can you give us some more details of what exactly is going down here?
Sure, sure. So, what happened basically in NCR after the pandemic and during the pandemic as well was that there were a lot of problems in terms of real estate, and most of these problems were from local developers who had run bankrupt. That's because they spread themselves too thin. They would start a project here, take up money. Without even completing one project, they would put their hands into another and then move to a third and a fourth. And that actually brought a lot of problems to them, in terms of the fact that even if, say, there were some payment problems in the second project, they couldn't have waited for the money to come from the second project, because they had already invested in a third project and then in a fourth project. So eventually, within a couple of years, there was news after news that there is one after another developer slash builder from the NCR area going bust. So what happened was people started sort of moving away from local builders in the NCR, because they knew that this can be a risky project. Also, people put in their entire lifetime savings into buying a home.
Yeah, yeah.
So they want to be very, very careful about it. And there have been horror stories across the NCR where people have lost money, and their entire lifetime savings was at stake. So people didn't want to make that mistake again. They didn't want to associate their home buying dreams with a local builder. And most of the local builders were anyway going bust. So there was a sort of a opportunity that got created for national builders, builders with a lot of social repute, etc. And then the Godreges of the world came in, and then they bought land at whatever price they could, because they knew that people are not going to go for the local builders. Also, the fact that local builders had taken a lot of hit in the last 2-3 years and did not have the kind of financial wherewithal to be able to buy land at that price. So these guys came in, and then they basically, what they were selling was trust, because there was a lot of trust deficit in the NCR when it came to real estate. So they said that we will give you your flat within this possible deadline. We will give you the best possible say clubhouse, we'll give you the best possible gardens in front of your house, but we are going to charge you a proper premium for it because we are not one of your local builders who's going to go bust. Initially it worked, people did book flats and all of that, but the prices kept going up. So when we spoke to a lot of real estate experts based out of the NCR, they said the only way for these prices to sort of normalize is when stronger local builders come into the system, where they are also able to sell trust to the customers, but they said that not at a kind of premium that the national players are selling it at. So that's the missing part in this puzzle, that strong local players are not able to come up.
Right. Okay. Before this, Ronak, I told you I was talking to all our young colleagues in the studio, right, in the Bangalore studio, and most of them are quite attached, I would say, to the idea of owning a home. But then there was also somebody, Shrishti, it was, who said, that she's not going to inherit any property from her family. So putting in that kind of money for paying EMIs for like next 25 years, 30 years, it just doesn't make sense to her, and paying rent is just way more easier for her. So in your experience, through reporting, do you think there's some kind of a change in how the younger generation feels about owning their homes, like, with all these crazy prices and the income levels not matching? Is it like still a feasible idea?
So talking strictly in terms of finances, it does make more sense to rent a house vis-a-vis buying a new house, because the ROI etc. usually does not add up. If you're paying, say, even if you're paying 20% less than your EMI in terms of rental and investing that 20%, you will be at a better position financially in, say, the next 10-12 years. But the thing is that people don't buy a house keeping finances in mind, especially in India. People buy a house for their mental peace, because they're conditioned in a way that I don't want to continuously move places. One. Second, I want to feel as if this is my property, this is my own home. I want to design it a certain way. I don't want to live with somebody's restrictions. I don't want an owner coming into my house every day, checking whether I've made whether I've tarnished the house in some way or the other, or whether I'm keeping the house properly or not. And or maybe I don't want calls at 2 in the morning when I'm partying with my friends in the house to lower the volume. So they basically are looking for mental freedom when they're buying a house. So financially, it's a better decision to rent. But in terms of mental peace, a lot of people consider buying a house to be better and paying extra EMI for it as well. So those basically, that's how we sort of differentiate between the two. But as our younger reporters pointed out, that it's obviously a hassle in terms of finances. Um, you're basically you're not just buying a house, then you're doing the interiors of it, you're setting it up, etc., etc. All of those things are really a hassle in terms of finances, while that's not really the case if you're moving into a fully furnished rental apartment. But the reasons for both are completely are not very inclusive of each other. People rent for financial reasons, but people buy for more mental peace sort of reasons.
Right. Okay. So tell us, what happens if prices keep going up in this manner? Like, is the housing market at some point just going to implode, in the future?
Not exactly implode, Snigdha. So it's almost a 7 to 8 year cycle that real estate goes through, where for about 4 to 7 to 8 years, prices keep going up. Then there is sort of a correction that happens, which we saw after 2000 and after 2020. That correction started happening.
How does that happen?
So what happens is the number of builders in a particular state or group of states go up. The availability of land goes up. The specific authorities which sanction that land, they start, sanctioning lands slightly faster. So the supply side of it basically starts to become more robust. And because demand is nearly constant in terms of housing. Once the supply becomes slightly more robust, then the prices get corrected. What's happening right now is again the supply side has become a problem, which is why there are sky high prices, and then there are additional reasons like people going for luxury and all of those things as well. So eventually, what will happen is these prices will also start to correct because newer builders will enter the system. Better land, more land will start getting sanctioned off. So the units price of every unit, average unit, will start slowly coming down because not every property will be a Godrej property or a Shobha property. There will be other builders who will be coming in with lower cost of construction as well. So once that starts happening, then we will see small corrections in terms of prices. We did see some sort of a correction happening after 2020, after 2014 as well. So similar correction is expected again after, say, maybe 1.5 years, 2 years, because it cannot always keep going up. There will be some sort of a market dynamic that will come to play where developers start to realize that, all right, people cannot buy, or not everybody can buy, say, a 10 crore house or a 15 crore house.
Right. Okay. Ronak, last question. Our colleague Staman, he brought up this very interesting point towards the end of our chat, studio chat. And, he said he thinks that, if things continue this way and prices keep going up and, the housing market remains the same, this sort of intra-migration will happen, where he said people will probably start they'll just leave big cities and they'll start moving to smaller towns and villages and cities. Do you think that's really going to happen? I really want to know your thoughts on this.
He's absolutely right. It started during the lockdown itself, where people realized that there's no point paying rent and staying in a city where I can just, move back. Especially once work from home, etc., became so profound and popular. People did. So there's a study as well where so many people in India have moved back home post the pandemic, which is why we see the larger brands having outlets in absolutely tier 3 towns as well, tier 2 cities as well. That's because people who were used to staying, say, in the Mumbais of the world, post lockdown, they moved into, say, Howrah, and they did not find the sort of same eateries that they could find in Mumbai. So brands were forced to open their outlets in these towns as well. So reverse migration has been happening, but he's right. If housing prices keep becoming as unaffordable as they are right now, there will be no other choice but to move out of those places.
Daybreak is produced from the newsroom of The Ken, India's first subscriber-focused business news platform. What you're listening to is just a small sample of our subscriber-only offerings.
A full subscription unlocks daily long-form feature stories, newsletters, and podcast extras. Head to theken.com and click on the red subscribe button on the top of the Ken website.
Today's episode was hosted and produced by Rai Snigdha Sharma, and it was edited by Rajiv CN.